to You with Dr. Mona Minkar.
Hello and welcome to Back to You, where we interview friends and fans of Planes, Trains, and Keynes. Today we have Jason Strother. Did I say your last name right?
Jason Strother rhymes with brother.
Okay, there you go. That's Jason Strother. That rhymes with brother. How are you doing today?
Mona, I'm doing great. I just moved back to New Jersey less than 2 weeks ago. I'd been living in South Korea really for the past 15 years, but really I hadn't gone anywhere in 2 years, more or less, mainly because of the pandemic. So it's great to be back here in the Garden State.
So tell us a little bit more about what you do, Jason, and welcome back to the Garden State.
Thank you very much, Mona. Well, so I'm a freelance journalist, and like I said, I've been living in South Korea since 2006. I write a lot about North Korea's nuclear weapons, politics, that kind of stuff. But over the past couple of years, I've sort of shifted my focus to do more stories about that concern disability and accessibility issues. I'm legally blind. I have a condition called cone dystrophy. So, I'm quite interested in stories related to other people who have vision impairments. And I believe it was last year I read about you winning the Holman Prize from the San Francisco Lighthouse for the Blind, that you launched the Trains, Planes, and Keynes series. And I reached out to you and we did a little interview together, and I wrote an article about you and your series for the South China Morning Post, which is a newspaper in Hong Kong.
Which is how I got to know about you, because I didn't know who you were until you reached out and was like, I want to interview you. And I was like,
you didn't know who I was. I was a little disappointed that you didn't never heard of me, but I got over it.
I'm sorry, Jason. Yeah, well, now I've heard of you. I interacted with you.
No, so I'm so glad we had the chance to meet last year, and I hope that we have some more collaborations down the line, including this. So maybe that has come true.
Well, yeah, but other collaborations would be great too. So, Jason, my first question for you, well, the first question I usually ask, which you answered, is how did you find out about Planes, Trains, and Keynes? And you read that I won the Holman Prize.
That's right. Yeah, I've been familiar with the Holman Prize, I guess, for a couple years now. A friend of mine had applied for it. I think maybe in the same year you did. So I was aware of what they do. I'm a big traveler. I've been to 30 some countries. I guess I've lived abroad for the majority of my adult life. And I even got around to reading the biography of James Holman, the namesake of the Holman Prize. So I was aware of the prize, and I'm always looking for a good story that concerns disability. And when I read about your YouTube series, I thought, well, great, there's a good Asia angle for it. So I was able to pitch that story to this newspaper in Hong Kong. So it just worked out perfectly.
Okay, that's awesome. So my question though, so you read about the Holman Prize, you saw that I won. I presume you watched some of the Planes, Trains, and Keynes episodes.
I think I watched them all, yeah.
Well, did you feel a connection with it? That's what I want to know. Did you actually feel connected to it?
Certainly. And I've used, with the exception of public transportation in South Africa, I've used public transportation in Singapore, Tokyo, London, and I know I rode at least a bus or something like that in Istanbul when I was there in 2005. But I think maybe the system you were on the other year was a little bit more advanced than what it was 16 years ago. So I certainly felt a connection. I'm a big advocate for public transportation. I use public transportation to get around. In South Korea, public transportation is fantastic. I was a little upset that you did not include Seoul on your list of countries, but maybe for the next season of Planes, Trains, and Keynes, you can make your way out there, because Seoul's subway and bus system is fantastic. I think it's very accessible for people with disabilities. They've tried hard to make it accessible for people with disabilities. So I get it. I got exactly what you were doing. And I saw the importance of someone who has a vision impairment going around the world to show how many other countries have often far more advanced public transportation systems than what we would find back here stateside.
I know, isn't that? I remember after Japan, I'm like, how am I gonna go back
Yeah,
here
sure.
and like be okay with what I have here? So I was a
Yeah.
little bit like, you know,
It's, coming
dismayed for a
back to
while.
the US, there's always a little bit of reverse culture shock sometimes. And there have been times when I've come back to New Jersey from South Korea, from other countries with very good public infrastructure, and I'm riding a train here, from suburban New Jersey into Manhattan. I think, is this a developing country? Like, it's almost shameful how bad our public infrastructure is in the US.
Yeah. Well, I hope they change it. Like that's my goal. I don't know. So do you feel like are there certain moments? How did well before I ask you that question, actually, you said you went to almost all those countries that I went to. How did it compare the experiences that I had with yours?
Well, I mean, I just remember your infamous situation in London where you were
Yeah.
getting into a battle royale with one of the transportation officials there at, I guess it was at Heathrow. It was at one of the airports,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, it was in the train station in Heathrow. Yeah.
I've never had that kind of an interaction, thankfully. But wow, I was, I can travel, I don't necessarily present as someone who is visually impaired. I don't walk with a cane. I don't have a guide.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
So, someone who is just, passing by me isn't going to pick up that I have a low vision impairment. So I've never had that kind of pushback from, a train or bus operator. I have had people accuse me of faking that I was visually impaired. I have a transit card here in New Jersey that says I have a disability, and I've been told by one or two bus drivers in my life that, hey, this is a fake. You're not visually impaired, and tensions get raised from that. But no, I've never had the kind of the situation that you faced there in London. So, but proud of you for fighting back.
Thank you. Thank you. It actually caused a lot of discussion on Reddit, on YouTube. It was really interesting. I feel like I sparked a conversation,
Yeah.
to say the least.
Good. Well, sometimes it takes, ruffling some feathers to get action happening. You have to you have to stand your ground and push back, and you won in the end, if I recall correctly. So bravo.
So are there other moments, I mean, that you connected with, especially on the lighter end of the like lighter moments, like more comedic side? Did you find it funny?
Yeah, I mean, you have a good sense of comedic timing. It was fun to watch your videos and go around and just, do a bit of a sightseeing through you in these countries. I think maybe the part that the scenes that resonated with me the most were when you were in Tokyo, because I've spent time in Tokyo. I lived there for about 3 months many years ago. So I'm familiar with Tokyo's public transportation, and hearing you made a good point to bring up all the sounds that the different subway stations play, all the little musical chimes.
Yeah.
And yeah, that kind of brought me back to riding the subway in Japan, and that was nice. And it kind of took me on I went down the rabbit hole reading about who was the musician that created those jingles, and it was a lot of fun.
Yeah, there's a whole story behind it. It's actually really cool.
Absolutely. So yeah, thank you for doing that. That really made the video more engaging for me.
That's awesome. Do you feel like there were certain concepts or like blind culture moments that were shared that you were like, yes, I'm glad this is being put out there, or oh, I didn't really agree with that?
Well, I think, I mean, I think it speaks again to your experience in London, but I think you had some other similar situations. Maybe was it in Singapore, but just the kind of, or in the various airports you traveled through, kind of making that, knowing where to draw the line between asking for help and trying to assert your independence. And I think there's a tendency for a lot of sighted people, when they see someone who's blind or they learn someone has a low vision impairment, that they want to, they want to play the mother or father role. They want to be your caretaker. And for someone like us, I think I think we have an independent streak in us, and we want to do as much as possible solo. But there are times, of course, that, I'm going to need help reading printed material or spotting signs from far away. And sometimes you have to, I don't know, let your guard down. You have to be less defensive.
Lower your resistance, accept help. Like for me, it was really important to demonstrate like this concept of like, I get to choose when I want the help and when I don't. And as you see in different episodes, like for example, I accepted help assistance in the airport in Japan, but I didn't in London. Because when I went to Japan, I was so exhausted. I was like, no, I'm gonna need that. I'm gonna ask for the help. And so it's okay.
There are so many different factors that contribute to one's the enjoyment one feels when they're traveling internationally, and especially in a country like Japan, where that was your first time visiting Tokyo, correct? So
yes, it was.
You've never been there before, so that was a completely new experience for you. There is a real language barrier in Japan. At least the subway stations announce in English to make it helpful for foreign travelers. But you had absolutely
Japan
to ask.
But it was really funny. Japan for me was one of the easier places to navigate because people didn't assert themselves. They answered you when you asked.
Okay.
They tried to help. And everything was so organized and designed for a blind person in mind too, that it felt like very manageable. So it was kind of amazing.
I think this has been your experience while traveling in Tokyo, and certainly it's been my experience using public transportation in Seoul. You have public infrastructure that is fairly well equipped for people who are blind or have disabilities. Many elevators, there is the raised tactile paving throughout metro stations in both Seoul and Tokyo. But as soon as you get out of public facilities like subway stations, the inaccessibility begins. And in South Korea, while you can get around. There are announcements at intersections. You can press a button that will announce when the light turns green. I think you also saw that in Tokyo. It's still hard to get a job as a blind person in South Korea. It's still hard to get married. I have a blind friend in Seoul whose, potential mother-in-law is really pushing back against her sighted daughter marrying a blind guy. So there are so many social barriers, even though there is good infrastructure to help people with disabilities. Right, it's, there's a balance. There's finding the right balance is much more challenging.
My next question for you is, I believe everybody should watch Planes, Trains, and Keynes, but if there's a specific group of people that you feel like would benefit from watching Planes, Trains, and Keynes, who are these people?
The parents of visually impaired people, because I think a lot of parents are probably very understandably protective of their children who are blind or have a low vision.
Yeah, my own parents are like, oh. My mom was like, I'm glad Natalie was there, the camera woman.
Right. So, but plenty, I think a lot of family members, and again, it's understandable. Parents are protective of their children, whether or not they have a disability. But I think that what your video shows is that international travel is not as scary as some people might believe as it would be for a visually impaired person.
Yeah.
Of course, many Americans don't travel internationally, even if they have full visual access. So I think if parents, family members were to watch your series and see like, hey, look, Mona can do this. This is, using public transportation in Johannesburg or Singapore is probably easier than compared to whatever city or area they live here in the United States. That could kind of, make it easier for a visually impaired person to convince their family, or at least to reassure their family that they're safe while abroad.
Yeah. Okay. And finally, last but not least, but you already hit upon this. What would you like to see in the second season of Planes, Trains, and Canes if we manage to do it?
Sure. Well, I mean, I would love for you to go to South Korea. You need to see Seoul. Seoul is a fantastic city. Love it. But stay, I think you could also stay closer to home and
Yes.
point out the highlights as well as some of the shortcomings of the various transportation systems across America. New York, DC, Boston, wherever. And I don't know. I think it would be a nice comparison to watch your original series and then compare that to 5 or so cities here in the US.
Okay. I think that sounds great. Do you have any other comments, thoughts you'd like to share?
Oh, wow. Mona, I mean, I think this was, I think your idea for the Holman Prize was, extremely useful. It absolutely represented the mission of the Holman Prize, and I think did honor to the late great James Holman himself.
Oh, that's so awesome! His story is amazing. I want to be like him.
Yeah, well, absolutely. He is. I don't like to use the word inspirational too much, but he blazed the trail for a lot of people, and just not visually impaired people. I mean, there weren't many people that were doing what he was doing at that time in the early 19th century. So I think Planes, Trains, and Canes lived up to his legacy, lived up to the legacy of the prize in honor of him. And it was great. And I think you were a great role model for other visually impaired people who have a passion for traveling, or for who want to act on their interests to travel abroad. So congratulations.
Well, thank you very much. Those are really kind words. And for everybody listening, thank you for listening. And if you want to learn more about Jason Strother, his social media links will be down below, so check it out. Check out his articles. And thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mona.
Do you want to be on Planes, Trains, and Canes? Send us an email at planestrains@gmail.com.
Make sure you subscribe to our YouTube channel, Planes, Trains, and Canes. You can follow us on TikTok, Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram. And stay tuned for more episodes of Back to You.